Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. My name is Edlyn. I'm the Community and Marketing Manager for EDUtech Asia, and I'd like to welcome you to today's EDUtech Asia webinar session. Today's session is on Universities of the Future. What is the vision and how are we driving it forward? And it is hosted in collaboration with D2L. Today, we have put together a brilliant panel of speakers from Australia, the Philippines, and India, and they have so many interesting insights to share with all of you today. Today's session, we have Tony Maguire, the Regional Director for D2L Australia. He will be moderating the session today. And if you have any questions for our panel, please post them in the Q&A box you see at the bottom of your screen. Now I'll hand the time over to Tony, and he will introduce you to the rest of the panel and take us through today's session. Tony, please.
Edlyn, thank you so much for that lovely introduction. It's my pleasure to be working with a fantastic panel today. I'm here in Melbourne, working out of D2L's Asia Pac hub. It's fantastic to be able to work with such esteemed academics, thought leaders in the area. Dr. Gopalkrishna Prabhu, who's the president of Manipal University, Jaipur. We have Assistant Professor Ana Ramos, University of Santa Thomas. Dr. Chris Campbell from Griffith University, and Professor Stephen Warburton from the University of New England. I'm delighted to have the four of you on the panel today. There's some really interesting things we're going to be chatting to, I think. I think what distinguishes this particular panel is not only the locations and the profiles of each of the academics joining us today, but also I think the focus that they bring and their care and concern over many years in the as leaders of peak bodies. So Chris, for instance, is the president of Ascolite. Anna, you're president of the Philippines e-learning group. And I really am hoping that this session today will distinguish itself from others that look at the vision of universities for the future with a little bit more nuance, a little bit more flavor, perhaps a little bit more, I guess, grounded experience, what you're seeing across all of the different channels that you draw information from peak bodies, from your own research, and from, of course, what the sector is telling you through your own institutions. I might just spend a few moments asking for each of our team to share a little bit about themselves and, I guess, the context and the context for their institutions and their own work. Prapu, would you like to go first?
Good morning, and it's my pleasure to be a part of this session. And it is a great association with all the members who are here, and also discussing on a very important topic today, especially post-pandemic. And I belong to a place called as Manipal University in India. Manipal is a group very known for the education and healthcare. And this university, although it's a part of the big group of 75 years, but this university in the northern part of India, so which is about 10 years old. Tony, is okay, or do I need to explain? Fine.
That's great. Anna?
Good afternoon, everyone. So let me first thank the organizers for the opportunity to engage with you today, as well as our participants and esteemed panelists. So I'm Ana Sheryl Ramos. I oversee the massive wide e-learning adoption of the University of Santo Tomas for its 46,000 students under the UST Cloud Campus project for the past 9 years. So in this capacity, I have major responsibilities for ensuring that our professional development programs for our faculty workforce are industry aligned, as well as they practice remote teaching skills across broad e-learning spectrum. I also lead a premier organization of e-learning professionals under the Philippine E-Learning Society.
Hi everyone, it's lovely to be here and presenting in the webinar, discussing. I'm a senior lecturer in learning innovation at Griffith University. So I work in the central teaching unit, and I actually am one of a team responsible for teaching the academics at Griffith how to teach. So that's a really nice thing that I do get to do, and I get to do research with our academics across the university. So that's also very nice. I'm also president of Ascolite, as Tony mentioned, and through Ascolite, which is predominantly in Australia and New Zealand, and through into some of the Asian countries such as Singapore, we do provide a lot of professional learning and a lot of various sorts of leadership in this space at the moment, particularly around with COVID and moving online. Thanks, Tony.
Thanks, Chris. Stephen.
Thanks, Tony. Hi, everyone. Real pleasure to be here. Just following on from Chris's point, actually, just to say that we'll be hosting Ascolite here at the University of New England in Australia, where I currently work. Just in brief, I've worked, well, I suppose internationally. So I've worked in the UK, New Zealand, and now Australia. The main thrust of those different roles that I've taken, which have been from academic through to senior leadership, really have been around digital transformation, particularly in the field of technology enhanced learning, so kind of the EdTech field. Currently, I am an executive principal at the University of New England, so interesting terminology, effectively a kind of pro-vice chancellor role. And I look after lots of interesting parts of the university, so, well, interesting to me anyway. Curriculum academic management, I look after the academic quality department. I also look after the whole of digital education, and also one of my kind of areas that I've really kind of enjoyed working is around academic development, so the academic skills office as well. So there's a bit of background. I hope that I can bring some of that expertise to bear to the panel with the panel today. Tony, back to you.
Thanks, Stephen. That's fantastic. And look, it's congratulations too on the formal appointment into that role, Stephen. You and Shelley will bring a lot of weight to that. Shelley Kanash, ex-Bond and USQ. I think it's going to be a really interesting time for UNE. If you get the opportunity to drop into or visit, COVID notwithstanding, if the travel gods allow, the Ascolite conference at Armidale, I would wholeheartedly recommend it. I've been going for many years, was a member for many years in various shapes and forms over the journey, and it's a conference that really distinguishes itself in terms of a collegial spirit. It's grounded in good, solid practice. The special interest groups are strong. I think it's a fantastic association. If you have the opportunity, you haven't had a look at the website, go and check it out. I'd like to also just throw in there, we're in the second round of our D2L Ascolite Grants program too. So last year, Chris and Stephen were discussing with us how we could assist Ascolite. What we came up with was recognising the challenges that COVID brought to the table. We thought about ways that we could provide support to early career academics. So we put in place a grants program with Stephen and Chris. We left the qualification, the process in their hands, because we wanted to just provide the support rather than have any kind of specific input in the process. Chris and Stephen have done a fantastic job. I think we've had 3 awards now. We're coming into our second round now, and it's probably a good idea to dust off and see where we are with those too. So I'll get back to you and chat to that, and no doubt see you at Ascolite. So please, there's a little a call out for Ascolite there, a little ad. We might just spend a couple of moments, and Stephen and Chris, I'd be interested in your perspectives on this from both a regional university perspective and then also a university that's in a massive growth corridor in Australia. Anna and Bapu, I'd be really interested in your views too. And I might start with you first, take the Indian perspective. How has the pandemic changed your institution's outlook? Have there been changes in the country's policies and settings towards higher education? We know that international students have kind of come and gone, but how have those policy settings maybe and what's happening in the country changed? Bapu, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, so the basic questions today is whether this pandemic changed the institution. and the policies in the country. Yes, majority of the universities in India, they are already in the digital path. But this pandemic has really accelerated this digital growth and the engagement. So for example, as soon as this pandemic hit, although we started these kind of a digital engagement, and we are forced to get into the online platforms. The first challenge that what we had is to change and the teach the faculty how to engage the students and the curriculum through the online platforms. And many of these particular courses we used to do it on face-to-face, and immediately in one particular day. So we had to shift this paradigm from the physical mode to an online mode. And anyway, we are very happy. The larger group of faculty members immediately changed this gear and learned how to use these platforms, and not only using this platform, meaningfully engaging the students, number one. Number two, although the students are very tech savvy, but however, again, going through this platform, having this disciplined way of learning is something that they also engaged very fruitfully and moving forward, number two. Number three, again, one is our own mindset to make this happen. But actually the architecture, the physical infrastructure, the bandwidth, availability of the network in the different parts. So those were real challenges, and we are very happy. The government has made this kind of a policies and availability of these networks, which made possible in the even in the rural part of India, and that is something which is remarkable. So the three angle, one is the faculty engagement and upgradation themselves. The second one is the students' willingness to take part in it. And the third one is the government policies and the physical infrastructure, and which made it is happen. Only one change, Tony, which we found is there are some courses which has an experiential learning part of it. So that is something that in our opinion we missed, whether it is an healthcare related courses, hotel management related courses, and some of these basic science related courses where there is a large number of experiments need to be done. And those are the courses where we really find a lot of difficulty to start with. But we change the curriculum in such a way that the initial part of all the theories are being done in the online, and hope that now the situation will be back. The students are back in the campus. Whatever it is missed as far as the experiential part of it, that we will do it when the students are back. So my final sentence for this, yes, there is a change, but definitely everything cannot be done only on online. And moving forward, maybe a blended mode is something that which we may look for it. So yeah. I'll stop it here. Over to Tony.
No, thank you. Anna, your thoughts on policy settings and how things have changed for your space?
Because we live in an archipelagic country like the Philippines, we are not only culturally diverse, but we also have, wider economic and digital gaps. Filipinos are known for being adopters of technology because we are known to be communicating a lot online in social media, but it's a different scenario when it comes to using the internet for rigorous online coursework. So the pandemic makes it much more difficult for our students during the lockdown. So while we assume that we can use internet connections to help during the pandemic, our educational system is unable to rely even on basic connectivity or students acquiring digital devices. So as we continue to lag behind among our ASEAN neighbors in terms of our internet speed, the affordability and accessibility. And because the primary mode of instruction before pandemic was predominantly face-to-face. So both our basic and tertiary levels were taken aback, similar to India, in terms of their readiness to teach online in this extreme part of the e-learning spectrum. So only a small percentage of schools in the country have had experience with full online instruction. And if they have prior, so it is in different blended levels. So schools that did not have, the digital transformation strategy in place before the pandemic are disproportionately affected. So that's why the government promoted what we call as flexible learning modes, even to the point of relying on traditional distance learning modalities such as printing self-learning modules, and literally delivering it house to house to the students. So our university has a different story altogether. Although in the Philippine e-learning society, we are seeing really that diverse adoption in terms of technology for the longest time that we've conducting our conferences and our training programs. So in the university, we have been employing online technology for about 20 years in massive scale. So we've had that edge of implementing our teaching and learning continuity plan so that we can transitionally seamlessly to fully online. However, there are those aspects that are beyond our control. So one is, of course, the lack of gadgets and the quality of internet connectivity. So we have allowed flexibility in modifying or reducing our program requirements to reduce the mental load of our students. We've also provided various flexi-blend packets combining both online and offline because we have issues with bandwidth and immediacy. We also have reduced the school requirements and give them adequate time in terms of fulfilling the outcomes. So I guess similar to India, we need to take into consideration that there are courses that can really not be taught online. So these are skills-based, specifically for our health-related, health-allied or STEM courses. So even that we have incorporated simulation programs, it would not be enough. So it's a good thing that we later on came back in the university only for health related subjects, and then the rest are happening online. But with the lockdown, once again, we are back to zero. Everything else is now again online. So there is variation in terms of student and teacher readiness, digital equity. But I think with visionary leadership of our administrators, we will continue to be digital resilient for the next generation of learners.
Thank you, Anna. That's fantastic. I like the way we're getting very nuanced approaches here to what we think about in terms of equity and access. And we've just thought about the Indian experience, the Philippines experience. Chris, over to you.
So while Griffith University was really well placed prior to the pandemic, with our third largest campus being a digital campus, it still sort of created a lot of change at the university, where some courses only had part of them were online and not everyone in the teaching team were able to teach or knew how to teach online. So there was still a sharp pivot to teaching online and the courses being conducted with all the student learning online. In Queensland, they have gone back to face-to-face, but increasingly we've been trying to develop forms of hybrid teaching so that in the academic lecturer is teaching in the classroom, students are both in the classroom and online. And there's still some learning of how to use the technologies, how to get the best technologies to be able to teach in a hybrid way, actually in the classroom. So there's a cost involved. And the other thing we've been grappling with in Queensland is that short, sharp lockdowns that they go into, where some courses are now face-to-face again, and they have to go into an online mode or stop for a week while there's a lockdown, and then they're able to go back into hybrid or face-to-face. So it's a little bit different in Queensland than in some of the other states in Australia and obviously across the world. And that's creating its own sort of tension points that we've been having.
Yeah, it's interesting how the way in which health orders in different jurisdictions have fundamentally changed the way that we operate, both from a getting a run up into something and then it just evaporates, we're locked down again, or if you think about when we first started, we put the whole first term really on ice, and we just had to flick that switch over about 2 weeks. Steve?
Yeah, it was interesting listening to the other commentaries there. I won't say too much here. I think for us, just for those who don't know, if we've got an international audience here, University of New England does have a very long and strong pedigree in online distance education. So for us, to some extent, nothing changed, but everything changed. So when I say that was, yes, we thought we were the online institution, but then we found all those spaces where in fact it is actually quite difficult to do a full online teaching and learning, teaching and assessment experience for our students to make sure they're progressing. So the particular area of focus, so just to pick a couple out of those to give a concrete example, which maybe others also would resonate with others, is around where we have a lab experience or we have those practicums. So where we have placements, work integrated learning, sending people out as part of their course, for example, within the education field. Very difficult to then do that, a lot of deferring of those activities, then bringing students into the lab as well. So some things you can do online, but that practical lab experience, that hands-on nature, very difficult to replicate. And again, that's been a little bit of a struggle. And the final thing to say, I think as well here is it's really forced us to concentrate on, and I'll call this, I'll come back to this later if we have time, is what are we doing with the data? So if we're more online, we are gathering more data. I mean, we all know that. We've got lots and lots of data. So for us, what we've been saying is, okay, it's more difficult to understand where your students are. It's much more difficult to stay in touch with them. There is a distance and you're mediated through these experiences, for example, here through Zoom. So how can we then leverage some of the data we've got to understand how our students are in terms of wellness and in terms of progression? So that's been a real focus as well. So what can we use in terms of data analytics, learning analytics, to help us keep us better informed about our students, to personalize what we offer to those students as well, to make sure that we are broad and we are offering an education that has equity for all of those students as well. So it's been a very interesting time, and yeah, we're still working on some of those issues now, Tony.
No, that's the perspective there on the data and the way in which you're looking to use that, I think, is a fairly broad approach that a lot of unis are considering, but each uni obviously takes its own approach. And I think the fact that you have, is it 50 or 60% of the students are off campus or more?
80% off campus, 20% in colleges. So yeah, it's a shift.
And you would tend to have those on-campus concentrated spaces for some of your courses?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Look, we might just talk about that lovely term we kicked around last week, post-pandemic pedagogy. Chris knows I'm not a fan, but I think it's a good way of pulling together a few threads here. We know that COVID has presented so many challenges to students, to academics, to the way in which business and funding models operate. The university sector, the K-12 sector, all education sectors have been really heavily impacted by this. But I might just start with a comment maybe from you, Steve, because we can talk about online pedagogy, but I'm interested to understand from an academic integrity perspective, how's this been maintained? How do you ensure quality? How are you tracking that?
Oh gosh, Tony, that is, now look, if we could answer that in this session, we'd be walking out with gold, I can tell you that. Look, it's a really tricky one. I think academic integrity is one of the issues of the moment, and certainly we're feeling a lot around our shift now to doing a lot more online. One mechanism is UNE. We've moved to online supervised exams, 100% proctored. So in terms of our academic integrity around, certainly around accredited courses, we moved successfully to a proctored mode. So that's helped. But then again, what we don't want to do is just use summative examinations as our pedagogical tool. So I think that is the danger. So if I'm picking anything, I'm probably saying what we don't want to do is shift to online, then just means we're still doing very big summative end of year exams. So for me, the secret around academic integrity is probably, it's probably twofold. One is really thinking through your assessment design. I think that's the most obvious. So how are you doing assessment? How are you thinking about assessment? So we're looking at things like incorporating more vivas, looking at group work and group-based protocols, looking at open book examinations as well. So really thinking through what does assessment mean to us as an institution, and also thinking very much around not over-assessing. And I think that's something many institutions are guilty of. It's just too much assessment. So there's a very nice, which a colleague of mine, Stephen Dobson from Victoria, nice Norwegian saying, you know, there's no point in keep weighing the pig, it doesn't get any fatter. So we do tend to over-assess. So I think it's thinking more broadly about what your assessment profile looks like, what you actually want out of assessment. We know as academics, and I think everybody in this sitting here knows that assessment drives education. It's one of those critical components, and it has so many elements to it around risk and around progress, around success, and around all those senses. So I don't think we've solved it. Those are the kinds of issues that we're starting to grapple with. Very much alternative assessment design.
You're right. The assessment piece drives so much of our activities. And I guess too, the implications of that has when we think about robustness of programs and regulatory bodies like TEXA. Chris, from your perspective, what do you think the health generally of the sector looks like from that robustness of program, quality of assessment, and then linking it back to regulatory bodies like TEXA and that happiness that they'll have because everything's tickety-boo?
Yeah, I think previously things were very robust, and when we had to do that pivot to completely online learning, things needed to shift quite quickly. And I definitely saw that universities were really trying to support academics to be able to change and move their assessment online while still keeping that quality. And my university also went to proctored exams. But the other shift that we had was that move to non-exam assessment. So online presentations, other forms of digital assessment, using various technologies like digital technologies that would assist students to be able to demonstrate the learning outcomes for their courses through their assessment and do that well. So we definitely saw that, and I think that it was done in a fairly robust way, and that our regulatory bodies were happy with that, and that's then come through, and it's changing and modifying our practice moving further forward and into the future. And my university actually moved away, some courses moved away from some exams and perhaps had less of a weighting on exams, went to more online quizzes with large question sets to try to keep the integrity of the assessment, as well as the other digital forms of assessment. And I think they did it fairly well, and moving forward we'll continue to do that.
Chris, I think that really speaks to both the art and science that we think about when we come together, we talk about assessment, we talk about educational design. When you get together at the Ascalite conference, I mean that art and science is so important to be able to share those stories, share those examples. I'm going to just change tack slightly, and just to you, Anna, I'd be interested to hear how the university thinks about preparing future-ready graduates and the skills and that alignment to industry and the jobs that they're going into. Could you comment?
Oh, I'll start by talking about two twin events that universities must foresee as they look at the horizon, or how they scan the horizon. So we know we are in the fourth industrial revolution, and then we have the COVID-19 recession. So in this context of what we call societal and economic equities, and in between, you have relevancy of the university. So as a result of these twin forces, the digitization has really leaped forward. We cannot say that everything else is negative, but in fact, we've seen universities really leaping into innovation in the way that they teach. But then again, we need to look into how also companies will acquire more emerging technologies in innovating business processes. So if this is going on in the companies, so universities must be aware of some of the skill gaps in the labor market, and as well as the inability of these companies to attract graduates with the right skills. So universities must, I think, must be proactive enough to match the emerging and declining jobs, such as in the areas of data analytics, AI, and computing, cloud computing in labor market. And doing so means that universities must have curricular offerings that must be recalibrated so to produce the right talent for what the industry needs. So this could be formal and informal methods of skill assessment, blending the right mix of approaches, drawing in from the internal faculty's expertise, as well as the external invited resource expertise into the classroom, on what are the new educational technology tools, as well as what are the tools available in the workplace. I think I'm looking at stackable curriculum to create personal learning paths, so that your students or students in the workplace can still join the university at a shorter period of time so that it could fill in the gaps. So since technology will evolve, universities must not only incorporate the technology tools that mirrors what's in the workplace, but as well as incorporate the emerging knowledge, skills, and attitudes into the curriculum. And it should be lasting and cross-functional at the same time, because we really don't know what will happen to them in the future. They must have this broad range of skills that are said to be transversal. So some of the emerging skills that we've known for a long time would be your critical thinking, analysis, and problem solving. But there are emerging skills like self-management, stress tolerance, and flexibility that we need. So we need, in fact, all of those, and they must be purposely designed into the curriculum, integrating them into what we call meaningful learning experiences that will target near transfer skills needed for the immediate job. So I think that's my thoughts on preparing students for the near future.
I liked very much your comment about stress tolerance too. We talk about resilience, but that stress tolerance, being able to flex when the wind blows and not break, I think it's a really important point you raised. Rapu, if I could ask you a question around your thoughts on the impact of the pandemic on your graduates now. They've been online. So what's been the impact on them as they now graduate, they're looking forward for their careers? How's that played out for them?
Yeah. So, yes, Tony, during this pandemic, most of the teaching, learning, academic happened online. So we would really need to think about what is its impact on the student when they graduate and to the corporate. So as we know, for all the campus-based programs, there are two areas the students learn. One is learning inside the classroom and learning which happens outside the classroom. So inside the classroom is basically, it is a curriculum, but as teachers say, our job is not only to uncover the subject. This is the beauty of it. But during study inside the classroom, it is being done fairly well, whether it is engaging them online and teaching them. And as Stephen, Chris, as well as Anna mentioned, that how we evaluate them, everything is being done. And I'm happy that the students are also utilizing this free time to go for some of the online courses which are available so that they will get an additional skill sets. So whatever it is supposed to be learned inside the classroom, it is being done beautifully well. But there are some learnings, as Anna mentioned, that about the stress management, the learning which happens outside the classroom, whether it is a team effort or if there is something that need to be learned on networking ability with the people, or something like conflict resolution, which happens sometime in the lab or inside the classroom or in the ground, whenever there is a sports and other things which happen. All these skills and attributes are very, very important in the holistic development of a student. So this is something that which is lacking, which we feel. Some university has made some kind of an arrangement again to engage them to talk. But in case if the students are not at all there on the grounds as far as the sports is concerned, the physical activities are concerned, and these are very, very important, especially during this period of the student life. So this is something which is really missing, and I'm sure that now the situations are comfortable. Student will come out from their house. They are started coming to the campus with a fresh energy. And of course, we need to follow all the guidelines, but still we need to emphasize the learning which supposed to happen outside the classroom. And I'm sure that whatever we have done online, it is a temporary measure without losing the academic cycle. And this is all the universities, the regulatory bodies, the government made some kind of a new policies, okay, so that the student will not lose the academic cycle. So they are ready. But there are some skills, as Anna mentioned, I think the students need to acquire faster. As a university, we must facilitate these things which happen before they go out and graduate and be there in the community or in the corporate. Over to Tony.
Thank you. That's great insights. I really appreciate that, Prabhu. Prabhu, I'm going to come back to you with the next question, but I'll just put some context around this first. I think there would be very few technology partners, vendors like ourselves who have not seen a growth in business. For ourselves, I think we've grown 44% across the Asia-Pac region. So it's been a time of significant growth for us. I guess from my own perspective, I think that affords opportunities. You know, an incoming tide should lift all boats. So we've been doing a lot of work with Global Victoria to help take EdTech Smarts more internationally. With some of the companies we work with here. But through Global Victoria, I've also had the opportunity to start having conversations with Indian EdTechs. The scale and the breadth of the Indian EdTech sector is jaw-dropping. You must have knocks on the door every second day, or every day, Prabhu, about technology solutions to a whole variety of problems. I'd be interested to understand how you deal with that very fertile ground, and do you have a kind of an approach or a framework that you think about when you think about onboarding new tools and innovation spaces around EdTech?
Yeah, Tony, it's me.
Yep, please. Yeah.
So during this scenario, there are so many new technologies are used in engaging the students. So for example, whether it is in the teaching and learning or evaluation or engaging them even in different media. See, for example, as mentioned, so teaching, learning, of course, the technology that we have used, but what I mean is the emerging technology like artificial intelligence and augmented reality and Internet of Things. So such of the new technologies, how to use that to engage these students meaningfully. As Stephen mentioned, basically for an evaluation, evaluation, academic credential, and ethics that we need to mention. So most of the time, teaching learning, it is, of course, the teachers will give different kind of an assignment. It was also being given, but how to avoid the mass copying of these assignments? And when we conduct these examinations, so how do we ensure that the proper evaluation is being done? So artificial intelligence, Tony, that is the new method with which the different portals, different technologies are being used. And as Chris mentioned, the evaluation method is slightly changed. It need not be that whatever we have used earlier, that means we are giving the question paper, the same question paper to everyone, and everyone is answering in the same time, and then we are evaluating. So this will, what do you say, indirectly encourage a larger group of students to copy from others and submit it. So naturally, we need to avoid that, and for which an artificial intelligence, as you said, large number of question banks are available, and these kind of a new intelligent software, it will identify some of these questions depending upon the degree of the complexity and given to the students, and will also identify whether they are giving the questions from their own side, or they are copying from some other places and just submitting it. This is the number one. But the most important is also how to give this experiential learning part to the students. There is an augmented reality and virtual reality can be used to give some of these, what do you say, experience part of it. So for example, if I give it, so as a biomedical engineering, so let us say if I'm teaching, and can I create that kind of an atmosphere so that the whole body can be seen in the three-dimensional, or is in mechanical or an automobile engineering, whether this AR, VR technology can be used to simulate the whole machines in the three-dimensional way and give it and make it is available. Can we use the students' skills to develop these kind of teaching modules so that it is not only the teachers are teaching, and the students are also developing these kind of models, and it is used in the teaching methodology. So in my opinion, these emerging technologies are also needed to explore in the teaching learning, student engagement, and as far as the evaluation part of is concerned. And few universities have initiated this support, and especially some of the new startups, the students have their own startups, and the kind of the technology which they have used for the gaming software, and today they are used for teaching. And this is the beauty of it. Students are interested in doing the gaming, but the same technology can also be used to develop some kind of teaching tools which will be more impactful and influential in learning. Over to Tony.
There's a piece there that you threw in that just, you're so right. Our students now have their own startups, which is a little bit frightening. When I went to Teachers College, starting up just meant getting up about 9 o'clock in the morning for my 9 o'clock lecture. So things have massively changed. You're right. Groups like EDUgrowth are constantly working here in Australia to provide funding and frameworks and mentoring opportunities for early career EdTech thinkers, CEOs. But you're right, our students now are creating those pieces of corporate growth. Anna, I'd like to ask you if you could put on your Philippines e-learning society hat for a moment. I'd just like your thoughts on how might existing and future learning technologies and techniques be used to foster transferable skill development, and lot more engaging digital environments. What are you seeing across the Philippines?
So from the Philippine perspective, there are current innovations being done, which I think could be useful in the future. So for example, the one that we promoted, we are being promoted for the longest time among our members, is to come up with a digital transformation plan. So if there are lists like these 5 areas that you have, then it could be something that you can actually use as your foundation in your future survival. So one element that supposedly should be there, regardless of what's going to happen in the future, is that having that clear vision for your school's philosophy and core values for the effective use of technology, not just for teaching, but as well as how you design it across the assessment practices. So second is that there should be coordinated, intentional, and what we call systematic professional development, whatever is the learning mode of instruction is. So from your blended learning probably to the fully online course. So with teachers training comes the design of exemplary learning experiences. So that these experiences must be aligned with what I've talked about, what is needed by the industry, as well as positive and relevant experiences. So next, I'd like to point on what Stephen mentioned about the data. So there's assessment and evaluation from data analytics, and that you use that to assist you in decision making. I also would want to connect this with what Dr. Prabhu mentioned, that they are looking at the power of AI and machine learning. So not just that we need a robust infrastructure, we also need what we call a reliable and intelligent infrastructure. So with next generation learning management systems, I'm looking at maybe D2L later on will invest on adaptive learning engine, wherein the activities are really anchored on constructive alignment, and that the activities and assessments are being pushed with personalized learning paths in mind. So with you having all of these 5 elements, then you can use that as your foundation. So we know that as of today, technology will no longer be a nice to have. It's already essential in keeping us on the same page with the rest of the world. So we need to go just beyond infrastructure. I think there's a need for us to have what we call long-term thinking and systematic transformation. And then you capitalize on the latest and the future of technologies. And finally, we should have laws and policies that should be enacted in order for us to do this the right way. And to make learning meaningful and lasting. I've mentioned about universities could get in the picture and create personal learning paths that by the creation of what we call a stackable curriculum that current students and students in the workplace can actually make use of, and also make the content snackable, because we need to reduce the impact of cognitive load. So with that, I think it could strengthen the connection of our students to clearly show how our students and employers can be helped by universities in order to move them up in the career ladders while the environment is changing.
Thank you, Anna. That was great. Just before we go, we spend a bit of time, the last 10 minutes or so, we'll probably open that up to a few more interesting and thought-provoking questions. Chris, just one for you. Stephen spoke earlier about data analytics right at the top. If there is one university in Australia which has done a bang-up job in thinking about its data structure, the way that it approaches personalisation, the focus on student engagement and success, Griffith is certainly one of them. It's through all of the work that you've done with LMSs, integrations with core systems, you've really thought long and hard about it. And I think you've got a great deal of experience and pedigree in that space. So I'd be interested on your views, not from an institutional perspective as such, but drawing on that for context, where do you think we are as a sector in terms of using data to effectively support students and support academics?
Great question. I think we're moving along, and you start to hear like what Steve was saying before, where using the data to find out where the students are at and then monitor student progress and really help facilitate their learning. And the universities are increasingly using data in various ways. And I know there's some great work coming out of Charles Sturt University in Australia around assessment data. And I know my university's been doing quite a bit in that space, even though we're not publishing our work in that area. It's happening, and it's happening in a lot of universities that I know of. And I think we're increasingly using the data, but I think there's still quite a long way to go.
Yeah.
I do think that some of those, we've got so much data, which Steve was nuancing, and we're still not using it to I guess, in the best way that we can to drive learning forward. I think we still have a little bit of a way to go, but there are universities certainly doing it, and in various ways. Steve, I don't know if you wanted to expand on that at all from your experience.
Yeah, I'm going to take a slight tangent actually on that one. Just because this is a really interesting conversation. So we talk about technology a lot. So I'm just going to do two things. One thing I really want to bring back into the picture, maybe I'll come back to this, is that we really acknowledge the role of the academic and the role of the teacher in this space as well. Because what we're in danger of doing is actually disturbing, or there's a space between learning and teaching, which we're using assessment as a proxy for that. We're using tools and techniques to understand what's happening in the learning process. We must not step completely away from learning, or we're in a very strange position where we are just looking at data and our students just become data, and we are dealing with data. So I think there is something where we need to always put the student, the learning, the academic back into that picture. So I will paraphrase another old colleague of mine as well, Dan Lorillard. He said, if you want to challenge technology to serve the needs of education, we need to know what we want from it. So we have to articulate, well, she says three things: what it means to teach well, what principles of designing good teaching are, and how these enable learners to learn. So I think we always need to put those back into the picture, because when we talk about framework for understanding what technologies we want to choose, where we're going to go, what's the best direction, is it AI, adaptive learning? Well, that framework of understanding those things gives us the reasoning behind why we're choosing a particular technological solution. Because to that point, Tony, you talked to Prabhu in India, the EdTech startup, there are thousands and thousands of possibilities for the kinds of technologies we can bring into this space. I would suggest that part of our roles here, and maybe those who are listening in, is we sit on that boundary mediating the kinds of technologies we feel should come into our educational institutions and how they support learners' progression. And we think about that safe. That is our job, to think about those. So just a slight tangent. Thanks, Chris, for handballing it over, and I just took that somewhere else. But yeah, I think Griffiths are doing an amazing job as well with data and how you're looking at that as well, and want to watch.
Yeah, I'd agree. Look, we'll spend the last 5 to 7 minutes, or 5 minutes or so, maybe just on one or two other more contentious questions. And I'll leave this open, so feel free to dive in. When we met last week, I talked a little bit about what were the challenges, who were the competitors, what was going to happen in terms of that competitive environment for universities going forward. And we talked a little bit about the commoditization of education. We talked a little bit about, the commoditization of learning. So you've got a whole variety of challenger organizations who are coming in for fee for service, who are increasingly responding to skills-based initiatives, funding models, and they're providing micro-credentials. Universities are also needing to effectively play in this space and make sure that they're able to, ensure that the brand around that micro-credential is relevant and appropriate. But what's the underlying business model for that? I guess I'd just be interested in views from what you're seeing, or your feedback on what you're seeing. Do you think that this, as I termed it, commoditization of education, that almost dumbing down to a Netflix experience. I mean, I can watch Netflix and then I might suddenly spend 45 minutes not watching anything and I'm just flicking through the screens. That's not a good thing, and that's certainly not engagement. So I'd like some feedback from your perspective on, do you see it as a challenge? Do you see potential hurdles that it brings, or business model challenges they have?
Easy question then, Tony, to finish on. Thank you.
Yeah, look, you've got 5 seconds, Steve.
Yeah, it's a really good question. Look, I'll start. I'm fine to throw in. So I think there's an implicate that, you're implying that universities, I think, because you had to, there's a question about what's the value of a university, what's the value of a university education? Has it been devalued, and are competitors moving into that? So I think the death of the university has been. We go through that cyclically. Probably every 10 years, the university is about to disappear. The last cycle I went through was the rise of the MOOC, and we're still here as universities. So I think universities are actually very good at adapting. In fact, universities are, let's not forget, are guardians of the kind of epistemology. So not everyone is doing a business degree. Let's not forget that. Not everyone is doing a data science degree. We have a lot of people studying in different kinds of areas and skill sets around our bachelors of arts, etc. So let's not forget that universities offer such a wide-ranging and whole, let's say, avenue into developing intellectual capital. So I think universities are very important spaces, which makes them so solid and so profound in terms of where they sit in our society. So it is about the social contract, the intellectual contract, and the money they put back into the economy through research as well. So institutions very much have multiple businesses, I would suggest, sat within them. So a university is not one single business, it's lots of multiple businesses, which is why they're very hard to understand. Once you ever go in, or people come into the university sector, they don't quite understand how it all operates, because you're both being corporate, you're both being social, you're both a public body, but also you're making money. These things are being juggled. So I think universities are very good at doing that. At the moment, I'd say the biggest challenges for us are very much around diversification of portfolio. So really saying, what is our portfolio of offerings? And certainly we're aware that there are a lot of micro-credentials and short courses that are being offered that potentially devalue some of the things that we're trying to do. But I would also suggest that university is also very good, and this is where I see a future university, very good at thinking about what I see a healthy university is about partnerships now. It's about where are you partnering with other organizations, be they corporate or public sector, to add value to your university offering. I think universities do that really, really well. So we partner in different kinds of spaces with different kinds of organizations. And I suggest there's quite a lot of room out there to coexist with all these different bodies. We don't all compete in a zero-sum game. I think we are all adding value to, let's put it broadly, human society as well by working together in that space. So I think I'm looking at our university, thinking about commoditization, about what behaviors we are engendering at the moment that put us in a strong position. So I don't think about what a university looks like. I think about what behaviors should we have. And I think it's around agility. I think it's around that being quite aggressive about organizational capability building. I think, Anna, you mentioned that earlier. So thinking about organizational learning to put us in a good spot. And I think as well about that whole idea of cross-divisional, multifunctional teams, and that idea of integrated services model. So modernization of who and what we are as a university underneath the hood of those intellectual offerings, and very much then around the kind of champions that we have within the system. We haven't touched on it here today, but education-focused academics is very interesting in Australia at the moment. Yeah. And also, again, everyone has mentioned the need for a very strong digital roadmap. So there's digital transformation, but there is a digital roadmap which shows that constant cycle, which we're all engaged in, of constantly having to go through the challenges of new technologies coming at us and adding value and benefit and making sure we see those through to that kind of benefits realization stage. I think that was about 10 seconds. Was it, Tony, that one?
No, you did brilliantly. And I think we're just coming up to the end of the session now, but I think you're right. 5-6 years ago, we were all talking about how do we unbundle educational services? And that was kind of something that I was hearing a lot as I was going around the traps, and people think about how they can find different models and services they could offer. I'll just maybe finish off with one other comment too. Someone famously said, if you're not paying for the product, you're the product. And I think what we said earlier about our students being, our students aren't data. At the end of all of this, this is heart, hope, blood and bone. This is about taking the affordances of technology and helping people lift themselves out of circumstance in whatever place they are, and meeting their aspirations. It's been a pretty tough 18 months. The next 6 months here in Australia, I think will test a lot of people in terms of that resilience that you were talking about, Anna. I hope that everybody is able to really take something out of today. I'd like to thank Steve, Chris, Anna, Brapul. Thank you so much for all of your inputs. It's been fantastic today. I'm looking forward to coming up to Armidale and having a glass of fine red and some lamb once we get together for Ascalite at the back end of the year. So if that's the case, we'll get out to was it the park again and have a meal on me.
Moore Park, Tony.
Moore Park.
Very local end to a global session. That great.
It is. So let's bring it back to people again. Thank you so much, all.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tony, and thank you to our panelists for taking the time to share their insights with us. I hope everyone here has had a lot of food for thought as to what they intend to do to bring their institution forward. And we would love to hear your feedback. So if you could scan the QR code you see on the screen, if not, the link is also available in the chat box. It's a really short survey form, and we would really appreciate if you could take some time to fill it up. And I did see some questions about the recording. So this session is also available to watch on demand. So I understand there are a lot of pointers that were mentioned today, and you would like to rewatch some of the insights. So that will also be available. And if we didn't get to your question today, I'm so sorry about that. But all of our panelists are available on LinkedIn. So if you would like to reach out to them to ask more questions, get some insights, that's also there for you to connect as well. And today's session is really about a broader discussion about universities of the future. And as I mentioned, it's hosted in collaboration with D2L, who have also started an ebook series on this particular topic. So if you'd like to find out more, hear more case studies, more best practices or experiences, you can scan the QR code. If not, you can head on down to their webpage as well. So if you have also any more questions about D2L specifically, you can, this is a QR code to get to their website on more questions and inquiries. If not, you can write to RB at his email address. I'll also pop it in the chat box later on.